Do you think waking up every night to go to the bathroom is a normal part of aging? If so, today's video may completely change your thinking. There have been cases reported where simply eating one thing before bed reduced nighttime urination and led to deeper sleep. As a specialist, I've dedicated nearly 30 years to researching and treating the elderly. Over that time, meeting countless patients, I've seen one common thread again and again. Doctor, that's just because I'm getting older, they say, accepting the fact that waking up 2, 3, or even 5 times a night is normal. However, from a medical perspective, nighttime urination is far more than just a simple problem. According to data from the Korean Society of Gastroenterology and the National Health Insurance Service, more than half of Koreans over 60 experience their sleep interrupted by nocturnal urination 3 or more times a week. More importantly, research results consistently appear in domestic media and academic journals, showing that repeated disruptions to sleep due to nighttime sleepiness increase the risk of falls and even dementia and cardiovascular disease. The Chosun Ilbo and Donghua Ilbo have repeatedly warned that poor sleep quality in the elderly shortens healthy lifespans rather than life expectancy. What I want to share in this video is by no means a miracle cure. I'm not suggesting that you quit medication or any other unreasonable folk remedies. Rather, I'm discussing a physiological principle that many people overlook because it's too simple, too familiar, or because no one explains it to them. In fact, this method has been mentioned in studies of elderly sleep in Italy and Germany, and some medical professionals in Korea are cautiously applying it in clinical practice. I'd like to ask you, watching this video, a cautious question. What time did you go to bed last night? And how many times have you woken up to go to the bathroom? If this question has made you pause and think, I hope you'll listen to my story today. I'll share with you what I know as a doctor, as simply and honestly as possible, so you can regain deep, safe sleep. I'll talk about just one thing calmly. I won't beat around the bush anymore. The one thing I'm talking about isn't any special medicine or expensive health supplements. It's simply taking a tiny amount of natural salt under your tongue just before you go to sleep. Some of you might tilt your head or feel anxious when you hear this. But as a doctor, I never recommend unverified information to patients. I first became interested in this method a few years ago at a geriatrics conference in Italy. A research team, observing the nocturnal urination and sleep fragmentation of elderly patients, reported that mild electrolyte imbalances were common in elderly individuals with excessively unstable nighttime fluid regulation signals. Specifically, as sodium signaling weakens, the brain incorrectly sends instructions to continue to urinate, even at night. Similar trends have been observed in Korea. According to data released by University Hospital in Seoul, a significant number of elderly patients with severe nocturnal urination had normal blood tests, but their nighttime hormone and electrolyte responses were significantly different from those of younger adults. The problem is that most patients remain unaware of this fact, simply attributing it to a bladder or prostate problem. I remember a male patient in my clinic in his early 70s. He was taking medication for high blood pressure and was barely able to sleep due to frequent bathroom visits, even 4 times a night. Despite extensive testing, he was not in a condition requiring urgent surgery or strong medication. So, I explained this method very carefully and with strict conditions. I clearly explained the type of salt, the amount, the time of use, and even the signals that indicate when to stop. As a result, after a week, this person said to the doctor, "Doctor, I still wake up once, but it's not as scary as it used to be." I'll never forget that expression. I know how important a night without fear is for the elderly. I want to warn you clearly, this method is not a panacea. It should never be used on those with severe kidney disease, renal failure, or those whose doctors have strictly instructed them to limit their intake. However, what no one explained to me is that a significant portion of nighttime urination in the elderly is not a problem with the bladder itself, but rather with the brain, hormones, and nerve signals at night. The mouth is one of the fastest channels through which these signals are transmitted. The reason I'm telling you this story now is simple. Nighttime urination isn't just an uncomfortable symptom. Every year in Korea, countless elderly people fall while going to the bathroom at night, and these falls often aren't just one. I no longer want to dismiss this problem as simply a consequence of aging. In the following section, I will calmly and scientifically explain why oral intake is so important and what signals this small stimulus sends to the brain and body. Many people ask me, "Doctor, what does taking salt in the mouth affect the bladder?" This is a very valid question because the root of nocturnal urination lies not in the bladder, but in the brain. I want to make this point clear. Frequent urination at night is not simply a storage capacity issue, but often stems from the brain's failure to properly recognize that it's nighttime. The human body has a biological rhythm that should automatically activate at night. Among them, the most crucial one is the cold-blooded hormone, ADH. This hormone increases at night, signaling the kidneys that it's not time to produce a lot of urine. However, as we age, this signal weakens. According to data published by the Korean Geriatric Society, more than half of people after age 65 experience a significant disruption in the nocturnal ADH secretion rhythm. As a result, the body continues to produce urine, even at night, just like me. The tongue is crucial here. Underneath the tongue are highly sensitive nerve receptors, and these signals are rapidly transmitted to the brainstem and the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a key center for regulating water balance and hormone secretion. A small amount of urine stimulation sends a signal to this area that the body is not acutely dehydrated. I wouldn't call this treatment. It's simply signal correction. A European study of elderly sleep reported that oral stimulation at night tended to reduce the frequency of brain arousals. As a Korean sleep medicine specialist mentioned in a media interview, the brains of older adults are easily awakened by even the slightest stimuli. Nighttime restlessness is not simply caused by urination, but is exacerbated by the brain receiving incorrect messages telling it to stay awake. I often discuss this in my clinic. The feeling of needing to go to the bathroom at night may not actually be due to a full bladder. This surprises many patients. However, actual testing often reveals that patients experience a strong need to urinate, even when the amount of urine consumed is small. This is the hallmark of neurogenic nocturnal restlessness. In these cases, no matter how much bladder treatment is administered, nighttime restlessness will not improve. Let me reiterate this point. This method should never be blindly followed. It can be dangerous for those with sensitive sexual partners. However, medically, it's clear that a significant portion of nighttime sleepiness in older adults originates in the brain's urinary system, before the kidneys or bladder. And the mouth is one of the few pathways that can quietly stimulate this signaling system. If, as you've heard this explanation, you've wondered if your body is in that state, that's a perfectly normal reaction. In the following sections, I'll clearly distinguish between those who can apply this method and those who absolutely should avoid it. Because I believe that living a long and safe life is just as important as getting better sleep. I must be very firm here. This isn't a simple tip that applies to everyone. If you take what I'm about to share lightly or follow it because others are doing it, you could actually harm your health. As a doctor, I prioritize safety over effectiveness. Those who can carefully consider this method share a relatively clear set of commonalities. This is for patients who wake up more than twice a night to urinate, but whose kidney function is not significantly impaired based on tests, and who do not have severe edema or breathing difficulties. This type of neurogenic nocturia is particularly common in patients who do not experience significant daytime problems, but wake frequently when halfway through the night, and in those who experience repeated urges to urinate, even with small amounts of urine. I explain this method very restrictively to these patients. Conversely, there are definitely some patients who should never be taken lightly. This method should not be used by patients with poorly controlled high blood pressure, advanced renal failure, or those who have been strictly instructed to restrict their intake of alcohol due to renal failure. As the Korean Society of Cardiology and the Korean Society of Nephrology have repeatedly emphasized, even small changes in intake can be a significant burden on the body in these conditions. I never compromise on this standard. A few years ago, a case presented in an international academic journal sparked my deepest consideration. An elderly patient, after reading online information and increasing their intake of stimulants, ended up in the emergency room with nocturnal dyspnea and elevated blood pressure. This case clearly demonstrates one thing: how and by whom the treatment is administered is far more important than the method itself. A similar incident occurred in my clinic. A female patient in her late 70s blindly followed the advice of others, but within a few days, her ankle swelling worsened. Fortunately, she stopped and adjusted the medications early, preventing major complications. However, that moment reaffirmed my conviction that the elderly body is sensitive to even the smallest changes. We must never forget this. That's why I always say this. This method is not a cure, but rather an optional supplemental signal. Always consult your medical history, current medications, and the advice of your doctor. You should consider this first. Reducing your nighttime expenses is important, but more important than that is avoiding a night's sleep and safely facing the next day. Now let's move on. If you meet the criteria for this method, I'll calmly explain how to do it safely and minimally, and what signs you should stop immediately if you see them. If you miss this part, everything we've discussed so far will be meaningless. What I'm about to explain is far more important than the effectiveness. Depending on how you do it, it can be helpful or, conversely, burdensome to your body. I always say this in my clinic. The elderly don't have the concept of a little more. Very small amounts, very short periods of time. That's the rule. If you meet the criteria and try this method, be sure to do it right before bed. Consider it only after you've finished all your day's activities, right before turning off the lights. The dosage should be extremely small, just enough to dissolve quickly under the tongue, and should not have a strong salty taste. I explain to patients that they shouldn't try to taste it, but rather just provide a signal. If it dissolves naturally within a few minutes, it's sufficient, and there's no need to drink a lot of water. A common mistake many people make here is increasing the dosage or repeating it during the night, hoping to see results quickly. This should never be done. Nighttime sleepiness isn't something that disappears completely in a day or two. The brain and hormonal responses change very gradually. A Korean column on sleep medicine explains that the circadian rhythm of the elderly adapts over a period of at least several days to weeks. The moment you rush, this method becomes dangerous. I always tell patients to listen to their body's signals first. If your face or ankles feel tighter than usual the next morning, stop immediately. The same goes for shortness of breath or a pounding heart at night. And if you measure your blood pressure, you should stop immediately if your morning blood pressure is noticeably higher than usual. Ignoring this signal can lead to problems far greater than nighttime urgency. The reason I warn you so repeatedly is because I've seen too many cases where people thought they were fine, only to have accidents follow. Older people don't recover like younger people. One overdone attempt can lead to years of pain later. That's why, when explaining this method, I always mention the criteria for stopping before the effectiveness. Now, let me clarify one more thing. This method is much safer and more meaningful when combined with lifestyle habits than when used alone. In the next section, I'll discuss 3 nighttime habits that worsen nighttime urgency and how to correct them. If you don't understand this, all the explanations so far are only half true. Many people misunderstand one thing. People believe that reducing nighttime urination will solve everything with just one method. As a doctor, I would say this is the most dangerous way of thinking. This is because the elderly body doesn't function solely on one organ. Frequent urination at night is often the result of a series of small habits. The first thing I always emphasize is drinking water in the evening. I'm not saying you should drink less water. The question is when to drink it. Many elderly people drink little water during the day, but then drink a large amount after dinner or just before bed. This habit simultaneously stimulates the kidneys and bladder at night. A Korean article on elderly health reported that simply drinking water earlier tends to reduce the number of nighttime urinations. I always tell my patients, drink when your body is awake to avoid waking up at night. The second thing is your sleeping position and movement. The act of rushing to get up at night to go to the bathroom is inherently dangerous. In fact, A significant number of falls among the elderly in Korea occur during the early hours of the morning while going to the bathroom. I believe the urgency is more important than the mere possibility of falling. Simply taking a few seconds to catch your breath before getting out of bed, standing upright, and then sitting down can reduce blood pressure fluctuations and dizziness. This small habit can make your nights much safer. The third is stimulating the brain before bed. Falling asleep with the television on or watching stimulating news and screens keeps the brain of the elderly in a state of alertness even at night. If the brain isn't fully rested, the bladder will continue to receive signals. As local sleep experts repeatedly warn, it takes the elderly a long time to turn off the stimuli. Creating a quiet environment for even just 30 minutes before bed can play a bigger role in reducing nighttime expenses than you might think. The reason I emphasize these three things is clear. The methods discussed above are only meaningful when built on these basic habits. Otherwise, even the best explanations will be ineffective. I always tell my patients, if you want to change your nighttime routine, you need to start by changing your daytime and evening routine. Now let's wrap things up. Nighttime sleepiness is not a shameful issue, nor is it a fate you have to endure alone. In the final part, I'll calmly summarize what we've discussed today and tell you what mindset you should have when approaching this issue. I hope that not only tonight, but also your future nights will be a little safer and more comfortable. We're almost at the end. My intention in today's video wasn't to reveal any miracles or flashy secrets. Quite the opposite. I want to talk about signals from your body that are so simple, so small, that no one has ever explained them to you. Nighttime sleepiness isn't just a bothersome symptom. It's a warning from your body, a message that should be heeded with particular care, especially in the elderly. Many people have worked hard their entire lives. They've put themselves on the back burner for their families, their work, and their responsibilities. So many have endured sleepless nights, saying, "This is just the way it is." But as a doctor, I want to make it clear, restful sleep is not a luxury. For older adults, sleep is healing, recovery, and the strength to face the next day. Recall what we've discussed today. The cause of nighttime sleepiness isn't just glare. We've learned how brain and hormonal neural signals fluctuate at night, and how even the smallest stimuli can alter that flow. I wouldn't call this a method of fooling the body. Rather, I like to call it a process of re-understanding your body's language. But at the same time, I've repeatedly warned, this video is not a prescription for everyone. If you have heart or kidney disease, or require alcohol restrictions, you should definitely consult your doctor. This video is not a substitute for medical advice, because your body has its own history and conditions. I simply ask questions and offer guidance. Nevertheless, if watching this video made you think, my body seems to have some explanation, that's a crucial starting point. The moment you understand your body's changes, your fears diminish and your options expand. Spending every night in anxiety due to nocturnal sleep isn't necessarily a natural part of old age. I've heard many seniors say this in my clinic. "Doctor, I'm just afraid of the night." That single phrase carries a deep anxiety, the fear of being burned, of not being able to fall asleep again, of tomorrow being even more difficult. I sincerely hope that today's video has helped ease that anxiety, even if only a little. Things might not suddenly change tonight or tomorrow, but just understanding, being careful, and respecting your body can make a difference at night. I've seen this countless times. Small changes accumulate, and at some point, you return to the moment when you say, "I wasn't fully awake yesterday." This channel exists for those moments. I'm not here to scare you, but to think together about a safer and more comfortable retirement. If this video was helpful, please like and subscribe so that others who are struggling with the same concerns can hear about it. And please leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching this video and how many times you woke up last night. I read every comment and use your stories to prepare the next video. I hope your nights are a little more comfortable, and I'll see you again in the next video. I sincerely hope you have a safe night today.